Well folks, we did it. We made it to the end of the first season of DOA Lore Explained, and to that end, a celebration of the 25th anniversary of the original 8 playable characters of the first DOA Live. But with the next season still in the works, this is the perfect time to do what I promised for the last 8 episodes. At long last, we'll be going over the story differences between DOA Dimensions and the original DOA quadrilogy. Keep in mind this will only be covering the characters we went over this season, and the same process will happen in Season 2, and so on. That being said, let's begin with the character we started with. Because the original DOA fighting game was born in arcade roots like many other fighting games in the 90s, you'll notice 2 major differences between how the retcon story is told compared to the original, which will apply to all 8 characters. 1. DOA Dimensions has the tournament take place almost exclusively on the Massive Freedom Survivor yacht, whereas in the original, there were several diverse locales. 2. DOA Dimensions now has a uniform cinematic story with only one outcome, whereas in the more arcade-like original, there were several endings depending on who you chose, Kasumi being the only one that's canon. As for Kasumi herself, she has an entire cinematic prelude that briefly shows her training with her father Shiden, in order to become the next successor to lead the Mugen Tenshin ninja clan, if only because her older brother Hayate was crippled for reasons we should know by now. It also explains her motivations for running away from the village, which marked her a traitor, and how she managed to get into the DOA tournament to find her brother's assailant Raido. Almost all these details, including Christie's involvement, were never previously in the original game. However, the CGI cutscene was previously seen for the first time in the Xbox remake of DOA 2, called DOA 2 Ultimate. Aside from some additional details to give the tournament a more cinematic feel, the general outcome of the tournament for Kasumi remains the same. However, in the original game, the details of Kasumi being captured by DOA officials would not be revealed until DOA 2 was released. The original DOA 2 was also based on arcade roots, and also has multiple endings depending on the character chosen. However, only a few of the endings, as well as a few mid-story cutscenes, are canon. In the second DOA game, we learned that Kasumi does in fact encounter her clone in the DOA Germany lab. However, further details on how Kasumi encountered her clone, and her escape from the lab, are further expanded upon in Dimensions. And what's more, the clone is specifically named Kasumi Alpha, and Liesl Hamilton is revealed to be involved in the events surrounding the DOA Germany lab, despite not making an appearance until DOA Extreme Beach Volleyball. Also a fun fact, Kasumi's original Japanese voice actress from DOA 1 and 2, Sakura Tange, reprises her role as the clone, Kasumi Alpha. Kasumi's mid-story encounter with Ryu Hayabusa in the original DOA 2 is heavily altered and repurposed into a lengthy cutscene in the aftermath of their escape from the DOA Germany lab in Dimensions. The iconic showdown between Kasumi and Ayane in the snowy fields of the original DOA 2 also remained intact in Dimensions. However, unlike the original, it cleverly combines both Kasumi and Ayane's outcomes, letting the both of them retain their iconic moments, even if they're not exactly like in the original game. Kasumi also encounters Ein at the Tree of Miyama as she did in the original DOA 2. However, in Dimensions, she is defeated by Ein in order for him to regain his memories of who he is. DOA 3, although being console exclusive, also shared similar arcade roots like the first two, having multiple endings and story cutscenes, but only a few cutscenes and one ending will remain canon. But before we get to the common cutscenes, there's an additional one exclusive to Dimensions that shows a weakened Kasumi in Kyoto, Japan, the cause of it being a fever, which Kokoro shortly concludes. Seeing Ayane in the distance, she had to escape despite her condition, leaving Ayane and Kokoro to work out their differences. The cutscene where Kasumi and Ayane encounter each other remains intact, however the locale where the scene takes place is entirely different. Kasumi also encounters Hayate in a mid-story cutscene in the same locale she did in DOA 3, but the time of day has changed. The fourth and final game in the DOA quadrilogy that Dimensions covers is surprisingly the one with the least amount of changes, but just like the other 3, only a few cutscenes and one ending will remain canon. As in the original game, Kasumi pleads Hayate to cease his attack on the DOA Tri-Tower, but her words fall on deaf ears, and Ayane prevents her from pursuing him as he leaves. This cutscene, as well as the location, remains exactly the same. The same applies to her encounter with Helena in the Tri-Tower as well as Kasumi's encounter with Alpha 152 in the Tri-Tower. And that wraps up all of Kasumi's story differences in the original DOA quadrilogy and DOA Dimensions. Tune in next time as we go over the story differences for Mr. Ninja Gaiden himself, Ryu Hayabusa.